Some nights, the silence in our house was so complete that I could hear my own heartbeat echoing through the empty rooms, reminding me of the rhythm that once lived inside me, but would never sound again. My name is Elena, and this is the story of how I learned that love doesn't end when life does. It just transforms into something deeper, something that carries us through the darkest valleys we never imagined we'd have to walk. I was 28 when this story began, living in a cozy blue house on Maple Street with my husband Marcus. He was 32, with gentle brown eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and hands that could fix anything broken. Except, as we would learn, the one thing that mattered most. We'd been married for 6 beautiful years, and our life had settled into a comfortable rhythm of morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, evening walks around our neighborhood, and weekend projects that never quite got finished because we'd get distracted talking about our dreams. But there was one dream that consumed us both, whispered between us in the quiet moments before sleep. The dream of tiny feet running through our hallways, of high chairs at our kitchen table, of Christmas mornings filled with excited squeals and wrapping paper scattered like confetti across our living room floor. For 3 years we tried. 3 years of carefully timed intimacy, of vitamins and fertility apps, of hope building and crashing in monthly cycles that began to feel like torture. I became intimately familiar with the sound of Marcus's footsteps on the stairs when he'd find me crying in our bathroom, holding another negative pregnancy test. He never said the wrong thing, never suggested I was being dramatic, or that maybe we should just be grateful for what we had. Instead, he'd sit on the bathroom floor beside me, his back against the tub, and hold my hand until the tears stopped falling. "Elena," he'd whisper, his voice thick with his own grief. "Our time will come. I feel it in my bones, sweetheart. Our baby is out there, waiting for the perfect moment to find us." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But as months turned into years, that hope began to feel like a weight I carried everywhere, to the grocery store, where I'd avoid the baby food aisle, to dinner parties where friends announced pregnancies with glowing smiles, to family gatherings where well-meaning relatives would ask when we were going to make them great aunts and uncles, not knowing that their innocent questions felt like tiny daggers to my already wounded heart. The night everything changed started like any other. Marcus had worked late at the construction site, and I'd fallen asleep on the couch waiting for him. Some mindless television show playing in the background. I woke to the sound of his key in the door, that familiar jingle of his keychain that usually made me smile. But that night, something felt different. My body felt different, heavier somehow, more aware of itself. For days, I've been noticing small things. The way the smell of coffee made my stomach turn. How exhausted I felt even after a full night's sleep. The strange metallic taste in my mouth that wouldn't go away, no matter how much I brushed my teeth. I dismissed it all as stress, as the cruel tricks my mind played when hope and desperation collided. But that night, as Marcus kissed my forehead and helped me up from the couch, something deep inside me whispered, "What if?" The next morning, I stood in the pharmacy aisle for 20 minutes, staring at the pregnancy tests like they were precious artifacts I wasn't worthy to touch. My hand shook as I picked up the familiar pink box, the same brand that had delivered disappointment so many times before. The cashier, a kind older woman with silver hair, smiled at me as she rang it up, and I wondered if she could see the terror and hope warring in my eyes. At home, I sat on our bathroom floor, reading the instructions I'd memorized years ago, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold the test steady. The 3-minute wait felt like 3 hours. I set a timer on my phone and paced our bedroom, touching familiar objects. The framed photo of our wedding day on the dresser, the book Marcus had been reading on his knitstand, the soft throw blanket my mother had knitted for us, as if they could anchor me to reality. When the timer went off, I couldn't look. I stood in the doorway of our bathroom, my heart hammering so hard I was sure the neighbors could hear it. Finally, I forced myself to walk those 5 steps to the counter. 2 lines. Clear, unmistakable, life-changing lines. I collapsed onto our bed, the test clutched in my shaking hands. And for the first time in 3 years, I cried tears of pure, unbridled joy. I was pregnant. After all this time, all this waiting, all this heartbreak, there was a tiny life growing inside me. A life Marcus and I had created together. A life that would call us Mama and Daddy. I spent the entire day planning how to tell him. I wanted it to be perfect, memorable, something we tell our child about someday. I bought a tiny pair of yellow booties from the baby store downtown, my first purchase for our future son or daughter, and placed them in a small gift box with the pregnancy test. When Marcus walked through our front door that evening, still dusty from the construction site, I was waiting in the living room, the small box hidden behind my back. He took one look at my face. I must have been glowing, because later he told me he'd never seen me look so radiant, and his expression shifted from tired contentment to curious concern. "Elena? What's going on? You look different. I couldn't speak. The words I'd rehearsed all day suddenly seemed inadequate for this moment. Instead, I held out the box with trembling hands. Marcus stared at it for a long moment before taking it, his calloused fingers gentle as he lifted the lid. I watched his face as understanding dawned, the confusion melting into disbelief, then hope, then pure, overwhelming joy. "Elena," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Is this... are we..." I nodded, finally finding my voice. "We're having a baby, Marcus. We're going to be parents." He set the box down carefully on our coffee table and crossed to me in 2 strides, lifting me off the ground and spinning me around our living room as we both laughed and cried simultaneously. When he finally set me down, he cupped my face in his hands and kissed me with such tenderness, such reverence, that I felt like the most precious thing in the world. That night, we lay in bed talking until dawn painted our bedroom walls pink and gold. We discussed names, Isabella or Sophia for a girl, Gabriel or Daniel for a boy. We talked about converting the spare room into a nursery, about Marcus building a treehouse in our backyard, about teaching our child to ride a bike and helping with homework and all the beautiful, ordinary moments of parenthood we'd dreamed about for so long. The following weeks felt like living in a beautiful dream. Every morning, I'd wake up and place my hand on my still flat stomach, whispering good morning to the tiny miracle growing inside me. Marcus started talking to my belly during his morning coffee, updating our baby on his construction projects and promising to teach them how to use tools safely when they were older. We told our families on a Sunday afternoon, gathering them all in our living room for what we said was an important announcement. My mother, Sarah, cried and immediately started planning a baby shower. Marcus's father, Robert, got unusually emotional and hugged us both so tightly. I thought he might never let go. My sister Jessica started talking about becoming the coolest aunt in the world, while Marcus's brother David joked about finally having someone to pass down his baseball card collection to. The love and excitement from our families made everything feel more real, more permanent. This wasn't just our dream anymore. It was a shared joy that connected us all. At 10 weeks, we started preparing the nursery. The spare room had always been our catch-all space, filled with Christmas decorations, old books, and exercise equipment we rarely used. But as we cleared it out, I could envision exactly how it would look. Soft yellow walls, since we wanted to be surprised about the gender. A white rocking chair by the window where I'd nurse our baby while watching the sunrise. and a beautiful wooden crib that Marcus insisted on building himself. We spent weekends at baby stores, overwhelmed by the sheer number of things a tiny human apparently needed. Car seats and strollers, onesies and blankets, bottles and breast pumps. It was dizzying but exciting. I found myself touching everything, imagining our baby using each item, growing from a helpless newborn into a curious toddler, into a school-aged child with their own personality and dreams. At 12 weeks, we went for what we thought would be a routine appointment. Dr. Patricia Williams had been taking care of me since my early 20s, and she'd been genuinely thrilled when we'd shared our news. She'd assured us that everything looked perfect at our previous visits, and we had no reason to expect anything different. I remember lying on the examination table, the cold gel on my growing belly, Marcus holding my hand as we waited to see our baby on the ultrasound screen. We'd brought a camera, planning to take pictures of the images to show our families. Dr. Williams had promised we'd be able to hear the heartbeat clearly at this appointment, and Marcus had been talking about nothing else for days. But something was wrong from the moment Dr. Williams picked up the ultrasound wand. Her usual warm chatter fell silent, and I could see her brow furrowing as she moved the device across my stomach, pressing harder, searching for something she couldn't find. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Marcus and I exchanged glances, and I could see my own growing fear reflected in his eyes. Still, we told ourselves everything was fine. Maybe the baby was just in a difficult position. Maybe the equipment was malfunctioning. Finally, Dr. Williams set down the wand and turned to face us. Her kind eyes filled with a sadness that made my blood run cold. "Elena, Marcus," she said softly, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm so sorry. There's no heartbeat. The baby stopped developing at around 9 weeks." The words hit me like a physical blow. No heartbeat. Stopped developing. But that was impossible. I'd felt pregnant just that morning, tired and nauseated, and wonderfully aware of the life inside me. How could there be no heartbeat? "Check again," I heard myself saying, though my voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "Please, just check again. Maybe the machine is broken. Maybe you're looking in the wrong place." Dr. Williams checked again, and then a third time. But the result was the same. Our baby, our precious, wanted, dreamed about baby was gone. I don't remember much about leaving the hospital. I know Marcus drove because I was incapable of doing anything except staring out the passenger window at a world that looked exactly the same as it had 2 hours earlier, even though mine had been completely destroyed. How were people still walking their dogs and watering their gardens and living their ordinary lives when something so catastrophic had just happened? When we got home, the house felt like a tomb. Every corner held reminders of our shattered dreams. The pregnancy books on the coffee table, the bottle of prenatal vitamins on the kitchen counter, the pile of baby name books beside our bed. But it was the nursery that broke me completely. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see inside to the yellow walls we'd painted just 2 weeks earlier. The rocking chair we positioned perfectly by the window. The crib Marcus had been so proud to build with his own hands. It was all still there, waiting for a baby who would never come home. "Close it," I whispered to Marcus, unable to even walk past the doorway. "Please, just close the door." He understood immediately, gently pulling the door shut and turning the handle so it wouldn't accidentally swing open. But I knew what was behind that door, and I knew it would haunt me every time I walked down our hallway. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of grief so profound, I sometimes forgot to breathe. I stayed in bed, surrounded by tissues and the smell of my own sorrow, while Marcus tried to hold both of us together. He brought me meals I couldn't eat, sat beside me when I cried, and held me when the waves of grief threatened to pull me under completely. Our families rallied around us with the best intentions, but their words of comfort felt like salt in an open wound. "You're young," they'd say. "You can try again. At least you know you can get pregnant. Everything happens for a reason." I knew they meant well, but they didn't understand that I didn't want to try again. I wanted this baby, our baby, the one I'd already fallen in love with, the one whose future I'd already planned in my heart. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, incrementally, I began to function again. I got out of bed, showered, ate meals at the table instead of hiding under our covers. But the world felt muted, like someone had turned down the color and volume on everything. I'd see pregnant women at the grocery store and feel a mixture of envy and terror envy for what they had. Terror that they might lose it like I had. Marcus grieved differently than I did, where I was raw and vocal in my pain. He became quiet and withdrawn, carrying his sorrow like a stone in his chest. He went back to work after a week, throwing himself into physical labor, as if he could build something strong enough to replace what we'd lost. At night, he'd hold me while I cried, but I rarely saw him shed his own tears. One evening, about 3 months after we'd lost our baby, I was washing dishes and looking out at our backyard garden. It had been neglected since our loss. The flowers were brown and dying. The vegetables we'd planted in the spring overgrown and rotting on their vines. The sight of all that death and decay broke something open inside me, and I started sobbing right there at the kitchen sink. Marcus found me there, my hands still in the soapy water, my shoulders shaking with grief that felt as fresh as the day we'd lost our baby. He didn't say anything, just wrapped his arms around me from behind and held me against his chest. "I miss our baby so much, Marcus," I whispered through my tears. "I miss who we were going to be as parents. I miss the future we'll never have." That's when I felt it wetness on my shoulder where his face was pressed against my neck. He was crying too, finally letting out the grief he'd been carrying alone for months. "I miss them too," he said, his voice thick with tears. "I miss talking to your belly every morning. I miss planning their future. I miss the hope." We stood there in our kitchen, holding each other and crying for the child we'd never hold. And for the first time since our loss, I didn't feel completely alone in my grief. We were broken, yes, but we were broken together, and there was strength in that shared sorrow. That night, we talked more honestly than we had in months. We gave our baby a name, Lily Rose, combining my grandmother's name with Marcus's mother's middle name. We talked about our fears, our anger, our confusion about why this had happened to us. And for the first time, we talked about the future, not in terms of trying again, but in terms of healing together and figuring out how to carry this loss forward in a way that honored both our baby and our marriage. A few weeks later, I finally felt ready to face the nursery. The door had remained closed since the day we came home from the hospital, and every time I passed it in the hallway, I felt like I was holding my breath. "I think it's time," I told Marcus one Saturday morning. "I need to see it." He nodded, understanding immediately what I meant. Together, we walked to that closed door, and Marcus slowly turned the handle. The room looked exactly as we'd left it, yellow walls, bright with morning sunlight. The rocking chair positioned perfectly by the window. The wooden crib Marcus had built with such love and hope. But instead of feeling like a shrine to our loss, it felt like a tribute to our love for Lily Rose, a physical representation of how wanted and cherished she had been, even in her brief existence. We stood there together, and I could almost see her, a tiny baby with Marcus's dark hair and my blue eyes, sleeping peacefully in the crib her daddy had made with his own hands. The vision made me cry, that they weren't entirely tears of sadness. They were tears of love, of gratitude for the time we'd had her, even if it was shorter than we dreamed. What do we do with all of this? Marcus asked quietly, his hand resting on the crib rail. I looked around the room at the baby clothes we'd bought, the stuffed animals well-meaning friends had given us, the books I'd planned to read to her, and suddenly I knew. We give it away, I said, to families who need it, to mothers who are waiting for their babies like we waited for ours. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. She would have liked that, he said. Lily Rose would have wanted to help other babies. And so we did. We found a local organization that helped new mothers who couldn't afford nursery furniture and baby supplies. The volunteer who came to collect everything was a grandmother who had started the charity after her own daughter struggled as a young single mother. "Honey," she said, her eyes soft with understanding, "you have no idea how many babies are going to benefit from your generosity. This is going to make such a difference." The last thing to go was the crib. We decided to give it to a young couple Marcus worked with Jake and Maria, who were expecting their first baby in just a few months. They'd been stressed about finances, worried about affording everything they needed for their little one. When we carried the crib into their small apartment, Maria started crying before we'd even set it down. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her hands along the smooth wood Marcus had sanded and stained with such care. "We could never afford something like this. Are you sure?" I looked at Marcus and I could see that he was thinking the same thing I was. That somewhere, somehow, Lily Rose was smiling, knowing that her crib would rock another baby to sleep, that the love we'd poured into creating her nursery would comfort another child. "We're sure," I said. "Take good care of it." 6 months later, Jake and Maria welcomed a healthy baby boy they named Samuel. They sent us a photo of him sleeping in the crib Marcus had built, his tiny fist curled against his cheek, completely peaceful and perfect. Looking at that picture, I felt something I hadn't experienced since we'd lost Lily Rose's pure joy for another family's happiness, with no bitter edge of envy or grief. "We give it away," I said, "to families who need it, to mothers who are waiting for their babies like we waited for ours." Marcus was quiet for a long moment and nodded slowly. "She would have liked that," he said. "Lily Rose would have wanted to help other babies. And so we did. We found a local organization that helped new mothers who couldn't afford nursery furniture and baby supplies. The volunteer who came to collect everything was a grandmother who had started the charity after her own daughter struggled as a young single mother. "Honey," she said, her eyes soft with understanding, "you have no idea how many babies are going to benefit from your generosity. This is going to make such a difference." The last thing to go was the crib. We decided to give it to a young couple Marcus worked with, Jake and Maria, who were expecting their first baby in just a few months. They'd been stressed about finances, worried about affording everything they needed for their little one. When we carried the crib into their small apartment, Maria started crying before we'd even set it down. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her hands along the smooth wood Marcus had sanded and stained with such care. "We could never afford something like this. Are you sure?" I looked at Marcus, and I could see that he was thinking the same thing I was, that somewhere, somehow, Lily Rose was smiling, knowing that her crib would rock another baby to sleep, that the love we'd poured into creating her nursery would comfort another child. It's been 2 years now since we lost our baby, and our life looks different than we planned. Some days are still hard. Mother's Day, the anniversary of when we found out we were pregnant, the date we lost her. But we've learned to carry our grief alongside our love, to honor Lily Rose's memory while still living our lives. We never did try again for another baby. The fear was too great, the potential for loss too devastating to risk. But our love didn't diminish, it just found new ways to express itself. Marcus volunteers coaching Little League on weekends, and I started reading to children at the local library. We channel our parental instincts into caring for our community, for the children who cross our paths and need an extra dose of love and attention. Our marriage is stronger now, forged in the fire of shared loss and mutual support. We know we can survive anything together, because we've already survived the worst thing we could imagine. We laugh more now, love more fiercely, and hold each other a little tighter, because we understand how precious and fragile life really is. The nursery is now Marcus's workshop, filled with the tools he uses to build furniture for other families' homes. Sometimes I stand in the doorway and remember what it used to be, and I send a little love up to wherever Lily Rose is, hoping she knows how much she was wanted, how much she was loved, how much she changed us even in her brief time with us. If you're walking through your own valley of loss right now, if you're carrying a grief so heavy you're not sure you can take another step, please know this: you're stronger than you realize. Your heart can hold both sorrow and joy, both loss and love, both endings and new beginnings. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to carry your love forward in new ways. Take it one day at a time, one breath at a time. Let people help you when they offer. Cry when you need to cry. Laugh when laughter finds you. And trust that somewhere ahead of you, the sun is still shining, waiting for you to find your way back to its warmth. And if this story has touched your heart, if you found a moment of comfort or connection in these words, please share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Subscribe to be part of a community that believes in the power of shared stories, in the healing that comes from knowing we're not alone in our struggles, and in the hope that tomorrow can be different than today. Together, we can hold space for each other's pain and celebrate each other's healing, one story at a time.